time. I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. My voice is failing me at the moment, so I will keep it short. And you're not it. Jonesy, you're not it, despite what you might tell everyone. The point of all of this is that what we have in Australia at the moment, I think, is a situation where we are doing consumers harm. And we are doing consumers harm because we continue to create barriers to entry due to regulatory or red tape. So what happens is consumers are left to only get products from people who are already providing products in that market. It means that they get a higher priced product with less innovation, that's less innovative, distributed to them in a way that is maybe not as convenient to themselves. It is a shame that in Australia we need regulatory sandboxes to begin with, because what it essentially says is that our regulatory system is so bespoke that if you want to do anything innovative, you have to be put in a special sandbox. We picked up this idea from Singapore and other places because we wanted to encourage fintechs into this market, because we wanted to improve consumer outcomes. But it is interesting listening to Rod Sims from the ACCC yesterday talk about the financial services sector, where he said, the big four banks don't seem to compete on price and don't seem to compete on product innovation. But when asked directly, have you ever thought that maybe it's because of all the regulatory burdens that you are placing on the market and entry and producers that is keeping them from competing with people currently in the market? The head of the ACCC's response was to say, yeah, well, it might be that actually. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, it might actually be that we, the regulators, have created the problem. Recently I spoke to a financial services firm that does the bespoke financing of people who want solar panels in their homes. And of course, as you would know, Mr Deputy Speaker, the benefit of putting solar panels on your home is that you can sell electricity back into the network. So it has some return on what you're doing. And this company came up with the ingenious idea that what they would do is that they would try to match the cost of financing putting solar panels on someone's house to the feedback tariff that they get from selling that electricity back into the network. But of course, this business has done very well, and so it should. It's benefiting consumers, it's benefiting industry, it's benefiting the network, the electricity network, and of course it's benefiting all of us, the climate, the environment. But of course, what has happened since then is these taxpayer-funded consumer advocacy centres, the same people opposed to this legislation, because they don't care about consumer outcomes, they only care about getting themselves in the newspaper, have launched action using ASIC. This company has received 86 requests for information. They can point to no consumer that has been harmed. They can point to no market damage or market behaviour. They are a small company of 80 people. They've had to hire an extra 8 people and take 9 people off their front line to gather all the information that ASIC is looking for. This regulatory warfare that has been commenced by a whole bunch of advocates in our community, usually funded by this parliament, is doing our country harm, it's doing consumers harm, and is doing harm to our innovation. We are the 14th most competitive economy in the world. But when you look at our IR system, it rates at 115 out of 123 countries. When you look at Australia's red tape regime or regulatory regime, we're 122 out of 141 countries. We are in the bottom 10%. It is just a shocking state of affairs. And so we do things like this, a sandbox. And Schedule 1 to this bill extends the regulatory making powers in the Corporations Act, so it allows the establishment of the government to enhance the regulatory sandbox. That is, it allows the minister and this parliament to extend this sandbox to as many people as possible that it can. We will outline, the bill says that we will outline the eligibility criteria. I can only hope that it is as broad as possible. The types of products, I can only hope that they're as broad as possible, and the services that can be tested in this sandbox, I hope that they are as broad as possible. And I hope that because it will bring benefits to our economy and to consumers and ordinary Australians who are just trying to get ahead. Regulatory sandbox allows entrepreneurs to test new products without the inhibitive need to have a financial services or credit licence from the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. During the week, it emerged that Bendigo Bank has been seeking to be classified as an advanced bank under APRA regulations. They have spent 7 years and $100 million, and there's no end in sight to that application. Now, what that is doing is that the big four banks have less competition today because of regulations that we introduced and the way that APRA is administering them. How's that good for consumers? How's that good for our economy? The government's enhanced legislative sandbox builds on ASIC's existing licence exemption. The enhancements will broaden the scope, expanding who can use it, what can be tested, and how long businesses can test. The enhancements enable firms to test specified financial services, including financial advice, the issuing of consumer credit contracts, and facilitating crowdsourced funding. These are incredibly important initiatives by the government, especially around crowdsourced funding, which is disrupting the way that people can raise capital in the Australian marketplace. The government has been methodically progressing policies that will ensure that Australia is a leading destination for fintech talent and investment. This is a competitive sector, Mr Deputy Speaker. Comparable countries like UK and Singapore keenly look to attract Australian firms, and you only have to throw a stone if you go down to Darling Harbour in Sydney and you'll find a fintech firm that has been offered concessional tax rates, concessional loans, special regulatory regimes by the Irish government. We are living in a very aggressive environment where people are seeking to attract to their shores the next big thing. And we need to play in that game, and we need to play in that game very aggressively, Mr Deputy Speaker. The sandbox is expected to lead to greater competition and increased pressure on current financial providers, traditional and emerging, to be more responsive to consumer needs and to deliver better outcomes for Australians. So, of course, naturally, consumer advocate groups have said that they're concerned about that and that they're worried about this bill, because that's what you get from taxpayer-funded consumer advocate groups these days. This is one more step in the government's systemic approach to ensuring the policy settings are right to support Australian fintech businesses in order to succeed. Now, the member for Kingsford Smith mentioned that this should be part of a broader agenda, and he's right, and that's why this is part of a broader agenda. This is part of the National Innovation and Science Agenda that was announced by Malcolm Turnbull in 2016. This bill builds on the government's $1 billion National Innovation and Science Agenda, and it highlights our commitment to support innovative businesses in Australia and build a